As a small business owner, if you're like most of us, you probably think, I should be reading more. Today, we're going to have a conversation about being a small business owner and reading. I'm Brian Rump,
And I'm Matt Garrity from Matt AG Digital.
and this is the Kawartha Small Business Podcast. We have business conversations for the Kawartha commute. This episode is sponsored by Starting Point Digital Marketing. You know you should be doing digital marketing, but never seem to have the time to do it right. Your small business deserves to have good digital marketing that is quick, easy, and inexpensive. Starting Point Digital Marketing provides intentionally simple marketing designed just for you. Head over to startingpointdigitalmarketing.ca to get started now. All right, Matt, we have a sponsor and we have a conversation about reading coming up. How are you doing
I'm
today?
doing great. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I would be sitting down talking to anyone at length about reading. So that's an exciting new addition to my life.
I know, and I think we're like podcast trailblazers here because you don't often hear podcasts about reading, but it's something that you sort of brought up, and I think it's a really good conversation because I think I've met a lot of people who wish they read more, and sometimes feel some shame that they don't read more, and especially in the business small business category, there's just so many books that you maybe always feel a little bit behind or inadequate for not reading more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I felt embarrassed by the amount of reading that I did years ago and even today. I didn't even have anything to do with being a small business owner. It was just a recognition that like I'm an adult and I'm supposed to casually read for entertainment or personal growth, I guess. Last year, you'll laugh, but I think I read 3 books, and that was like, sweet, I read 3 books finally, which was the most amount of books I read in like 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. It's the most amount of books I probably have ever read from on my own outside of school, right?
Yeah.
Then this year, being really ambitious, I thought, all right, I'm going to read a book a month. And I
Wow.
think I'm at 3 or 4 again this year.
Yeah, 4 is better than 3, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just always kind of realized I understand the personal benefits of it. Also, as a small business owner, ways to sort of soak in information, that whole personal growth thing. But I don't know if it's an excuse, but I believe I'm a bad reader.
And reading is it's a skill. So I look at my own experience and you know, in elementary and high school, I think I was a good reader, but I wasn't like a crazy reader. Um, my parents never really took us to the library. I read the books I was supposed to for school, but I didn't really, looking back now, I didn't even know that so much was available. And I didn't read that much. I remember in university, my eyes would burn so bad from like trying to read academically. And at the time, I just thought, oh, that's just how it is. And I didn't realize that it's a skill that gets better over time. After school, post secondary, I didn't really read for a few years that much. I read professional development stuff. But then I just got more into reading, and you realize like the more you do it, the better you get at it, the faster you can read, the more you can absorb. You have to find what you like to read. I think that's a big ticket. Finding the style that you like to read and the format is also sort of critical as well. Not everyone loves the classics, and not everyone loves certain types of books. So you have to explore a little bit. but it is a skill. And, once you've read your, 4 books this year, try to make it 5 next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm still going to stick to a book a month, which is still ambitious for me. But to your point, I think it took me a year or two ago to realize I need to be maybe more focused on reading books that are of great interest to me. I used to, for years, try to read nonfiction, like biographies, for instance, just trying to like learn stuff about people. And I found that would take like a year to get through some of them.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
were good, some were the same, or I'd find a book. I think it was Slash from Guns N' Roses, where I read.
Nice.
No, it was Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers. I read his biography years ago, and I loved that one. That one I was completely immersed in. I read it very quickly to me, which was like 2 weeks at the time. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to go down this path of reading about rockers and their sex, drugs, and alcohol lifestyle or whatever. And then I read Slash from Guns N' Roses book. It's like, this is the same book as the Red Hot Chili Peppers one.
Yeah, there's one of my notes I have for our conversation is like recognize the formula,
Yes.
right? And the books are a big business, and there's a formula to some kinds of books. So that works 2 ways. One is if you like it, go for those. If you don't like it, don't go for those.
Yeah, absolutely. The Anthony Kiedis one, it was a great book. It was basically a book on addiction, if anything. And then the Slash one was more about actual history of Guns N' Roses and partying. It was entertaining. It was good. But at that point too, I kind of just got bored with reading biographies over and over again. And it was my
Yeah.
wife that recommended maybe I pick up fiction. So I went down that path a little bit in the last year. I would say, in the last couple of years, I've read 3 fiction books. The first one was Wicked. That one I got through relatively quickly, and then I did another one that sucked big time, and I just like couldn't get through it. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for the payoff at the end, and it never came. And like, I guess that's why I like TV and movies so much. I can
Yeah.
watch a slow burn of a story and get through it because I know like there's probably something that's going to happen. I like watching the story evolve. But with this book, it just ended. And I was like, "Are you kidding?" Like I read all that, and I didn't
Yeah.
any sort of payoff.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's finding the right styles you like. I think it's also important to separate what you're reading purely for fun
Sure.
versus what you're maybe reading for professional development. For me, those categories sort of merge a little bit because
Right.
I enjoy um, business books and certain types of things. But I also never plow through stuff I hate. If I can't get into it, if I don't like the style, I set it aside because there's more books. You can find ones that work for you.
You'll stop
On the
reading.
reading for pardon,
You'll stop reading the book.
yeah, I'll stop. I don't have to finish it. Right, it's not a school project. If the style's not very good. Sometimes it's just the print. I don't like print that's too small or like the pages that are just jam packed. Um, and I think there's some good science and formula around that. Some of the authors I read, I've heard talk about, how they structure and section a book, how they format it in the printing, what people like to read these days. In the business category, you get a lot of kind of shorter books. No one wants to read a 500-page book that's like crammed with text. They're just not as popular. So you gotta find what works for you. There's lots of ways to get information. So for me, like you shouldn't be forcing yourself to do it. There's also audiobooks, which are totally cool as well. Some people I know just listen to audiobooks. Personally, I, I, I love podcasts, but scripted audiobooks are not really for me.
Interesting. I found that listening to the audiobook was the best thing for my reading
Awesome.
because I found my biggest struggle with reading was I would be looking at the text, but I would not be retaining any of it. And I would be like 4 or 5 pages in, and I would zone back in and just realize I have absolutely no idea what is happening. And
Yeah.
questioning what the point of me reading was, and I have to go back and then I read
Oh yeah.
in the zone, and I don't remember literally any of this, and I read it 90 seconds ago.
I get like that if I'm tired a bit. And I think, again, it's the skill of being able to sort of slow down and make sure you're reading it, not getting distracted, um, that type of thing.
Yeah, and so I started listening to the audiobook, but I think not that that's cheating. I just don't really feel like I can say I read a book if I listen to the audiobook. But
I
what,
think you can.
really?
Not cheating. No, we're pro reading. We're pro like expanding your mind, learning some things.
We're
And
pro all media channels.
yeah, yeah, we like the different media channels. I think as a as a small business owner, in general, as a professional, I think you need to be reading, um, reading, listening to audiobooks, seeking out different information. It looks different ways, but one of the constants in business is that things are always changing. So you need to be, exposing yourself to new ideas, new thoughts, um, and you got to find the way that works for you. One of the questions anytime I interview someone for any job, I always ask, "What's the last book you read for fun?"
Mm,
And it's been a critical one of those questions where you look back and the people who sort of give you the deer in the headlights stare and can't figure out what they've read in the line of work I've been doing usually don't work out because they don't have the skill of like reading, finding things out, being able to go searching for information. Um, so, as a business owner, you're just solving problems all the time.
yeah.
And you need to be able to read like well for that. Or if you're not the best reader, Googling stuff on YouTube, figuring out your way of sort of learning stuff, new ways to do things. So, it is a skill I think that we have to work on. We don't necessarily have to be sprinting all the time. I read, I think, too many books in some cases, but it goes in spurts. Like sometimes my book list gets empty and I don't read for a few months. And then other times I'm doing like one or two books a week for long stretches. And that's not necessarily the best thing either.
Mm. How do you think we improve our skills as readers?
I think it's you have to do it. So again, carve out some time for it. I think carve out time whether you're intentionally reading for fun or if you're intentionally reading for sort of business or learning. And either way, just have a regular time where maybe that's what you do. For me, Sunday mornings, I always sort of have coffee, read, and listen to music on Sunday mornings. And that's usually either, well, I say all my readings for fun just because I rarely plow through something that I hate to read. So I enjoy that. So that always happens. And then if it's something I'm really into, I might read it all day. I might come back to it a little bit every night. But for me, that anchor is that stretch on Sunday mornings.
Right on. And what kind of, like, you say you're mixing business and pleasure often. What's some of the last couple books that you read that you really loved?
Okay, yeah. So for me, right now I'm reading and I really like it. It's Dan Sullivan, who has a business called Strategic Coach. And his business is probably the best in the world sort of entrepreneurship coaching program. And his book that he just launched is called Who Not How. So it's about um, when you have a problem as a small business owner, you don't need to find out how to do it. You need to find out who can solve that for you. So a good example is, starting point digital marketing would be a who, not a how. So for small businesses, you don't need to, you know, read a book about digital marketing and try to figure out how to be a digital marketing expert. You just hire someone to do that for you. And you focus on what your, unique ability, what you're best at is. So that's one that I really like that I'm reading right now.
Awesome. How did you get into reading so much?
That's a really good question. I think actually it happened and I went to university, Trent, and then I went to Fleming. And while I was at Fleming, um, I had a bit of a mindset change around reading. So at Trent in university, it was very much like reading literature, reading academic stuff. I didn't love it. When I went to Fleming, the courses were a lot easier. I had kind of learned how to read. Um, but that's also, going to college after university, I had learned that like professors are people too. And more of what you learn is from just talking to them. And a few recommended some books that I might like. And I just started reading them. Some were biographies. Because I traveled, I had a lot of time between classes sometimes. So I would just sit and read. Um, and that's really how it started. And then once I realized that I like nonfiction, I like certain topics, certain authors, you just start going down rabbit holes for that stuff. Now I listen to a lot of podcasts. Again, it's a business. Authors are on podcasts. So you hear them and you're like, oh man, I got to read that book. Good example of that is James Clear has a good one called Atomic Habits. And I think that's really good for small business owners. It's about building and developing your habits, and atomic sort of means at the atomic level, which is really small, so like small steps at a time. So and then you once you start noticing that, or they reference a book somewhere else, you like it's a sort of a never ending tunnel.
That's interesting. I think I'm stuck, like I mentioned, on the audiobook, listening to it. But at the same time, my tip to people is so I don't want to just be listening. I want to feel like I'm getting through a book and accomplishing reading a book. So what I do is I listen to the audiobook while I read the book. So
Okay, nice.
I'm visually stimulated. I'm retaining the words that way, but I'm also listening to the person explain it to me or literally read the book for me and I follow along. And I've found that I retain everything so well that way. That's been super helpful. But honestly, after talking to you now, I feel like I need to pay more attention to just enhancing my skills of reading and maybe like pulling the headphones out and actually just taking time to read the book and practice doing that.
Yeah, and it could just be finding the right books
Yeah,
for you, and what you want to read, what the style is. A couple tips is when you see the book, understanding who it's for, especially with business books. Like, is it for big corporations? Is it for small businesses
sure.
that are operating? Is it for sort of entrepreneurs who, want to start the next Google? Um, and understanding what it is that you might need. Um, there's tons of books on things like motivation that are going to get you hyped up. Personally, I find them kind of all the same, and I don't like that formula. Um, but it's finding the one that you like and make sure it's for you in the format you like, and again that you enjoy it, to practice those skills. If you don't enjoy it, find another one. Um,
Right.
if you're listening to this and you want to learn how to read, I've read tons of books. Um, I had a small business owner called me a curator a few years ago, and I was like, "Oh, I am a curator. Like, I read all these different things, and I can help you find, something that would be beneficial to you, because you don't want to be like, sort of building a skill that you kind of hate and don't want. Like, you want to be able to read it and be like, oh man, I need to apply this in my business."
Right.
And that's sort of the other point is some people will read all the books and never do anything or never listen to what they're saying. And one of the things I've been working on is actually doing the stuff they say
Right.
in the books.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm looking at my stack of books that I've read in the last couple of years now, and I am starting to see a bit of a pattern. There are a handful of business books that I read that I didn't really enjoy, but they're old. They're 5+ years old. A couple of them are 10 or 20 years old. There's two here that are only 5 years old. Like, that's changed marketing wise. Like, it's a good book. It's I don't know, a famous book in the marketing world, Growth Hacker Marketing. It's interesting, the concepts, but it's dated because a lot of the stuff they're talking about is, hey, this is up and coming. But now we're years into having done all this stuff. So I didn't really take away a lot from that one. I don't like the raw motivational books, but I am really into business mindfulness or mindset type of books. Those are quite interesting. I think you're right. It's just a matter of better curating
Finding it.
book list.
And mindset's neat. I'm going to give you some recommendations here.
Sure,
So first one on just this might not sound like a mindset book, but it definitely is. And anyone listening, this is my sort of number one book to read is Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And it's very much about the mindset and pattern that your business needs to focus on profit first. So you're in a business to build a life for you and your family. And the business should support that, not the other way around. So this book is really good in terms of focusing on that mindset and helping you realize that that's what you're sort of there for. And his personal mission is to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty. So it's a good mindset book for you.
that'd be interesting. I am hopping online now to go ahead and purchase that because I think
Oh,
it's something that's actually quite interesting. Something maybe not topical, but within the last couple of years that I think have universal, timeless type of advice versus marketing books, which are going to be dated at this point.
yeah. Now, next up, I'm giving you some, and we didn't plan this, folks. Donald Miller has written a few books that you might like, and I believe some of these concepts you refer to as my love child sometimes because I've been super into them. But there's a book called Building a Story Brand, which I think is a timeless or will be a timeless marketing book. And another called Marketing Made Simple, which sort of extends some of the concepts from that specifically into marketing. And they're both set up to be really nice reads. I think they're decent for sort of any business owner. And it, will help you, I think, work better with marketers. So again, it's not telling you here's how to do everything, but it's giving you a good direction of, when you find a who to work with, um, telling them what to do and working with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, like you said, to read these books and kind of get someone else's opinion, feel as if that person or author is almost contributing to your life and your business. I found of late too, it helps improve as I struggle to think of the words. It helps me to improve my vocabulary because I find as a marketer or a small business owner selling similar things often, I just sit there and recognize that I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. And no one else knows that other than me. So I'm always the only person rattled by it. But I'm wondering if the more I read, the more I can maybe enhance my vocabulary and better improve the things I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think part of it's being intentional in what you're saying. And to quote Mr. Donald Miller, marketing is an exercise in memorization. So, you're on the right track. So maybe it's just tweaking that language, learning some more things to be able to say.
Good point, for sure. What's the next book you're going to be reading?
Ooh, that's a good question. The next book. I actually am near the end of my book list. So I'm not exactly sure. I think it's going to be, it's called Banker to the Poor. It's been out quite a while. I've read um, the other book by the author, who I'm forgetting their name, is called A World of Three Zeros. And the zeros are related to sustainability. And I forget exactly what those three zeros are at the moment. But Banker to the Poor is um, basically, this is an economist, I think economist, part economist, from, I want to say, Indonesia, but I might be wrong on that, but came up with the concept of social investing. And social business. So when we talk about social businesses, this is where it came from. Banker to the Poor is about micro lending in a lot of its third world countries, and micro loans to be able to, lend to people to start a small, tiny micro business that have had some pretty decent impacts in the communities where they live.
Interesting. Do you ever read fiction?
I do. I enjoy a lot of my undergrad degrees in Canadian studies, so I read quite a bit of Canadian literature.
Mm.
Um, so my next up in my fiction line is a couple books I've been kind of saving by Richard Wagamese, who passed away. But so the books of his that I didn't get to read, they're kind of like his last few books that I haven't got to. So I have those sort of ready to go. Richard's an amazing storyteller. So I'm kind of looking forward to like just a nice afternoon where you sort of want to get wrapped up in a good story.
That's interesting. I think another thing I've taken away from this conversation, if no one else takes anything away from this, I will have taken a lot away from talking to you about this book, I promise you. But I need to also change my mindset on reading because, and we talked a lot about it already, where we talk about why we think reading is important to for personal growth and learning and getting better and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes that's a lot of pressure too. Like
It is.
people got enough going on. I need to change my mindset to make reading just a piece of my own entertainment. So instead of
Yeah.
watching TV or just sitting around doing nothing or whatever I'm into at the time, maybe I just need to focus more on reading being something that I do strictly just for fun and finding those books that will entertain me in that sort of way.
Yeah, and I think the entertainment's important, and that's why, to me, I say it sort of blends because I think I've found some authors that are entertaining people. So, like Mike Michalowicz of Profit First, another great one of his that I had completely blown my mind is called Fix This Next. And that's about sort of how to prioritize what to fix in your business next. And he uses a tool called the entrepreneur's hierarchy of needs. But it's so well written and his stories are so entertaining um, that it's like fun to read. And it's always like kind of maybe basic things or things that are right in front of you that you can easily understand. Um, so it's fun to read. It's not like a textbook. I hate textbooks. I say this as a part-time college professor who sometimes has to assign textbooks, but they're not always that great. So you got to find, the Mike Michalowicz. I love when Donald Miller has a new book coming out in the spring, and like I can't wait to get it and read it. Another one that I actually had a chance to review it before it launched is David Jenyns' Systemology. Um, and he has just an outstanding approach to creating systems for your business, which for most people is like the most boring thing ever, maybe. But again, just the way he structured the book is, just entertaining and great.
Awesome. So, like, one quick note, again, Kawartha Small Business Podcast, and we try to do our best to support and advocate for local small businesses. As you've been rhyming out some of these books, I was like, I'm going to be super cool. I'm just going to buy them as Brian's mentioning them. And I checked out the large book retailer online that thou shall not be named. And I was like, wow, that price point's pretty expensive. And then I hopped on local kentbookstore.ca and it's the same price as the big online retailer, which is not something you would ever expect, or the myth that it's always going to be cheaper online. So I guess just a quick shout out and a reminder to check your local bookstore before you go ahead and do the easy thing or what you think is going to be the cheap thing of buying online. And I know for a fact with Kent Bookstore, if they don't have it in stock, they'll order it in for you. They do all kinds of custom orders that you can pick up at the desk. I think they ship it to you if you want, but I know you can pick it up from them, etc. So give those local bookstores a shot. I'm familiar with the one in Lindsay. I don't know about Fenland, or I'm sure there's some in Peterborough.
Dana, the book lady in
Yeah.
Fenland Falls, is actually, and there's a pretty solid business book section there too, and it's not all crazy old stuff.
Yeah.
I've bought stuff that's been on my book list, and I sort of mean to order it, and I walk in there, and it's there, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and the two books that you mentioned that I'm going to buy, the Fix This Next and then Profit First, were the exact same price as the online retailer as it was with this local bookstore. So
awesome.
Check those out before you actually just do the lazy thing that I almost did.
Awesome. We'll put a link in the show notes for that. Awesome. Just right before we wrap it up here, I have two more book recommendations because we want to leave you with a good reading list of awesome things that Brian says you'll love. This is sort of a cornerstone for entrepreneurs, is Michael Gerber's book, E-Myth, or the new one called E-Myth Revisited. And it talks about the entrepreneurial myth that a lot of people think they're entrepreneurs, but they're really not. And one of the reasons he wrote his book is that he thought that every small business could be as profitable as a McDonald's franchise. And he sort of walks through some of the steps of exactly how to get there. And then if you're looking for one on sort of leadership and communication, one that I read that I loved is Kim Scott's Radical Candor. And it's a little bit more corporate, um, but it's just great as well. And it gives some good tips for really clear communication in an environment where, people want to be their best and, move their business forward. So that is a big episode. We've
This is
talked about lots of things.
you have ever been on a podcast. And thankfully, we do this for the Kawartha commute, and we have a time limit, and we're already over it. Because otherwise, this would be 9 hours of you recommending books.
I know. I think one of these days we will do a whole podcast on each one of these books. So it's just me getting it out there, and we're going to link to all of these authors and see if the algorithms will be kind to us. So. Awesome. We are shameless. And if you have no thoughts, that sounds like a episode to me. Awesome. Check us out on social media. Of course, you probably know that. And if you want to talk with us a bit more, get some more recommendations, if you want to be on the show, send us an email to setitup@kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.